Rational exponents are just another way to write a radical. So let's look at some examples. We have the square root of 25. That's the same as 25 to the 1/2. That's a rational exponent. Another example would be if we had the cube root of 27. That's the same as 27 to the 1/3. That's our rational exponents. We're working with these exponents. Before we get started, let's look at some properties of exponents. If we do a to the m power times a to the n, so both of our bases are the same, that's the same as a to the m plus n, where you add those two together. Here, if we have a to the m power times n to the n power, that's the same as saying a to the m times n. Here, a times b to the m power is a to the m times b to the m power. Division, both of these are the same, so you're left with a to the m minus n, so we subtract, so it's the opposite of multiplication. And here, when we distribute, you get a to the m divided by b to the m. Alright, let's look at some examples. We want to write these in radical form, so we want it to get to look like this. We want to go backwards. Whenever we're looking at these, the denominator of our fraction is what becomes our root. So this is a third root of x to the first power. So our numerator becomes the power on the inside. So another example would be, here's our root, so third root of x, 2, so it's x squared. Another way to write this would say we still have the third root of x, but put it to the square power on the outside. These are both acceptable ways to write it, so either way you prefer, it doesn't matter. So, denominator is what your root is, the numerator is what your power is on the inside. So let's go and look at the reverse. So if we have a fourth root, that's our denominator, and there's that invisible one, so it says x to the 1/4. Here, our denominator is a 3, because that's our power, and our exponent is 5. So x to the 5/3. I want you to add in a couple of examples. If we have the square root of 6x to the 3rd, how this works, this third power is only with the x, it's not with the 6. Our square root is an invisible 2, so that means we have 6, our root is 2, and there's that invisible 1 on top. So this is 6 to the 1/2 times by x. It's still with the square root of 2, but our exponent is a 3. So 6 to the 1/2 times by x to the 3/2. So split these up by separately. So there's an invisible 1 on top of that 6, if that helps. One more example before we move on to the next step. We have the square root, let's say 6x to the 3rd. The difference between these two is now this third power is to both things on the inside, the 6 and the x. So we can write that as 1. So we can say, okay, well, 6x has a root of 2, so that's our denominator, and a power of 3. So that's our final answer. So the difference between these two, if they're not in parentheses, the 6 by itself with the 1 on top, and you have two different rational exponents. If it is in parentheses, you have that one. Alright, I want you to flip over to the back side and kind of go down where there's extra space. We're going to look at simplifying. So I want you to write simplify down towards the bottom if you want an idea of where. Here's the 32, just kind of give you some space. Write simplify. First problem, we have 81 to the 1/2. We need to simplify this. Doesn't that really mean we have square root, because that's a denominator of 2, of 81 to the first power? And the square root of 81, we know, is 9. So that's our answer. So let's look at 64 to the 1/3. Well, we need a root of 3, because our denominator is 3. It's 64 to the first power. 64, or the third root of 64, we can use our calculators. We know it's 4, so that's an answer. What if we had 5 to the 1/2 times by 5 to the 1/2? Well, the half, the 2 underneath, that means square root, so the square root of 5 to the power of 1 times by the square root of 5 to the power of 1. Square root of 5 times the square root of 5 equals the square root of 25, and the square root of 25 equals 5. So take both things, rewrite them with your radical, and simplify. Last problem for the day. We have 2 to the 1/2 times by 32 to the 1/2. So let's first rewrite in radical form. We are using the square root of 2 to the first power times by the square root of 32 to the first power. Can't simplify 2. 32, we can break, actually let's not break that down. Square root of 2 times the square root of 32, we know when we multiply together it becomes 2 times 32. So the square root of 64, and square root of 64 is 8.